Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're taking some seriously heavy academic theory and flipping it into practical, usable knowledge by cracking a master's-level strategic management exam paper. But we aren't just going to sit around talking about abstract concepts. We're going to bring these ideas right down to earth, specifically looking at how they actually play out in the incredibly dynamic Nigerian business environment. If you want to understand how strategy really works in a fast-paced economy, well, you're definitely in the right place. Here's our syllabus for today's session. We'll be looking at 6 core areas. Does corporate strategy matter? Defining the strategic sweet spot, intended versus emergent strategy, the 4 strategy components, applying the BCG matrix, and finally, Mintzberg's 5 Ps. Let's get straight to it.
Section 1. Does corporate strategy matter? Okay, let's dive into our first challenge from the exam paper and tackle a pretty famous debate in the business world.
So question 1 asks us to critically review a total game changer of a paper from 2001 that really challenged the prevailing thought on corporate strategy at the time. For the longest time, a lot of researchers argued that it was just the individual business units, like a company's specific sugar or cement division, that actually drove profits and that the corporate headquarters didn't really add much value. But hold on to that thought because things are about to shift. Bowman and Helfat basically came out and said, no, you've got this all wrong. They completely refuted earlier claims, arguing that corporate-level factors under management's control, like how resources are allocated across the board, absolutely drive profitability. Think about massive Nigerian conglomerates like the Dangote Group or Bua Group. Does the corporate strategy matter there? Absolutely, 100%. The decisions made at the very top by corporate management on how to share resources, like, say, shifting capital generated from cement to fund the construction of massive new refineries, directly dictate the success of those individual units. So yes, corporate strategy in fact does matter.
Section 2. Defining the strategic sweet spot. Moving on to question 2, we need to address the absolute most fundamental challenge executives face, actually defining what their strategy is. Collis and Rookstad highlighted a bit of a dirty little secret in the business world. Most executives literally cannot articulate their business strategy in a simple statement. I mean, if you walk into the boardroom of a mid-sized Nigerian enterprise right now and ask the leadership team to state their strategy, you'll often get these conflicting, incredibly vague answers like, we want to grow profitably. Guys, that's an ambition, not a strategy.
A rock-solid strategy statement has to clearly define 3 things: the objective you want to reach, the scope of where you operate, and the competitive advantage that serves as your means to get there. For example, a rising Nigerian fintech startup shouldn't just say they want to be the best bank. No way. Their objective might be reaching 2 million users in 3 years. Their scope could be targeting unbanked SMEs in Lagos and Kano, and their advantage might be a proprietary USSD technology that doesn't even require internet access. You need the ends, the domain, and the means. Whether you're a massive global firm or a local trader, specificity is everything. This example brilliantly illustrates the concept using the brokerage Edwards Jones. They specifically target conservative and individual investors who prefer to delegate their financial decisions. Notice how crazy specific that is. They know exactly who they are targeting and, just as importantly, who they are not targeting. Whether you're selling financial services in New York or consumer goods in a bustling market in Onitsha, defining your strategic sweet spot with this level of precision is what actually aligns your entire workforce.
Section 3. Intended versus emergent strategy. Now, what happens if a company doesn't happen to have a perfectly written strategy statement like Edward Jones? Question 5 throws us a bit of a curveball, asking us to discuss whether it's true that not all organizations actually have corporate strategies. Honestly, it's a trick question.
The real answer lies in how strategy actually develops. Sure, some firms might lack a formal intended strategy drafted up by executives in a boardroom, but they still possess an emergent strategy that just naturally forms over time through daily decisions and routines. This is incredibly relevant in the Nigerian context, right? The business environment here can be highly volatile. We're talking currency fluctuations, sudden regulatory shifts, infrastructure challenges, you name it. A company might have a grand intended strategy mapped out in January, but by June they've had to completely pivot. That daily adaptation, those routines they build just to survive and thrive, that is their emergent strategy. So even without a formal document, their consistent actions become their strategy. Section 4. The 4 strategy components. Let's move over to question 3 and see how corporate strategy is actually constructed in practice.
To answer this one, we're going to look directly at some authentic study notes from a strategic management class. As you can see from these raw academic notes, the four components are resource allocation, organizational design, portfolio management, and strategic trade-offs, which is all about prioritizing the balance between risk and returns across different business units. Imagine a major Nigerian telecommunications company. They have to allocate finite resources, right? Maybe deciding between expanding 5G infrastructure in Abuja or pushing mobile money services in rural areas. They have to design their organization to handle different geographic zones effectively. They manage a portfolio of voice, data, and enterprise solutions, and ultimately, they're making intense strategic trade-offs every single day based on the risks and returns of the local economy. Section 5. Applying the BCG matrix. Now we get to play the role of a consultant for the Asden Group to tackle question 4.
We essentially need to recommend which businesses the Asden Group should invest in or divest from, using a classic consulting framework. Developed by Henderson way back in 1970, this matrix plots business units based on their business growth rate on one axis and their relative market share on the other. It neatly breaks businesses down into stars, cash cows, question marks, and dogs. For Asden Group, the recommendation is to harvest those reliable cash cows to fund the expansion of stars while making some really hard strategic trade-offs to divest the dogs and carefully improve the question marks. Let's apply this to a Nigerian, fast-moving consumer goods company. Their classic, beloved bottled water brand, that might be a cash cow. Growth is slow, but absolutely everyone buys it, so it generates steady cash. They take that cash to fund their star, maybe a highly popular new energy drink that's just taking the youth market by storm. Then maybe they have a new fruit juice line in a highly competitive market. That's a question mark needing careful improvement to see if it can become a star. Meanwhile, they might have a frozen food line that is just bleeding money and losing market share. That's a dog, and they need to have the sheer discipline to divest it so they can focus their capital where it actually generates a return. Section 6, Mintzberg's 5 Ps. For our final exam question, we're going to rapid fire through a famous academic framework by Henry Mintzberg. Mintzberg basically argued that strategy is just way too complex for a single definition. Instead, he proposed multiple interconnected views. And this is where things get really fascinating. The crucial point here is grasping these 5 Ps. Strategy can be a conscious plan, a competitive ploy, a historical pattern of actions, a position in the market, or an overarching perspective shared by the company's culture. Let's look at the Nigerian telecom wars again. A company might use a massive, unexpected discount on data plans as a ploy to completely outwit competitors. Over time, aggressive marketing becomes their pattern of behavior. This establishes their position as the go-to network for the youth, all of which is driven by a corporate perspective or culture that highly values bold, disruptive innovation. You see, they aren't mutually exclusive at all. They all work together. Well, we've successfully cracked the exam, covered the theories, and applied them to real-world Nigerian contexts. But the real test is outside the classroom. I want you to look closely at your own organization, your own startup, or even your own team, and ask yourself, which of these strategies is actually driving your business today? Are you operating on a carefully intended plan, or are you surviving on an emergent pattern? Figure that out, and you are well on your way to mastering corporate strategy. See you next time.